welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid. Be welcome, gentle summer day, with bread and robins rounded laid.
Well, good morning and welcome. Why did I step on that? Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to the First Unitarian Church. Welcome to our last formal worship service of the church year, which of course we celebrate with a wonderful picnic for the entire family in Sugar House Park. Following our service, we'll be starting at about 11:30 or so. Now, if you are new to the church this morning, you may not fully understand what it means for a church to take the summer off. When I meet quite regularly with LDS leaders, this is always what fascinates them most about Unitarianism. And I've learned they would forgive us our theology if it meant that they could take the summer off too. I try to make clear to them that we don't stop being good people with a moral purpose just because it's hot outside. I tell them we simply believe that God trusts us to take the summer off, to which they're not sure how to respond to that. But in truth, we don't take the summer off. The church has simply spared my sermons for 10 weeks, giving the congregation and me a bit of needed relief. We have a wonderful summer forum series again this year, lovingly arranged by the Reverend Harold Strawn. And he brings in a host of terrific local speakers who will engage you fully, guaranteed. Being absent from the church for a while, engaged in summer projects and taking some journeys is good for the heart. Absence from this church does make the heart grow fonder. We come to realize what a wonderful gift this religious community really is, and the depth of what it means to us personally. Symbol of light and of knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. May we open our service turning our hymn books, please, to number 347. Well, as we come together on this beautiful June morning, may we take a moment to unite our minds and our hearts in a spirit of prayer, reflection, meditation. O Spirit of life and love, as we stand at the edge of summer with prospects of travel, further explorations of the outdoors, looking forward to the warm summer sun, preferably not too warm, and the storms, of course, that gather frequently in late afternoons to wash clean the heat. May we give thanks for the enormous array of blessings that we are privileged to count. This day and every day, may we affirm the grace of all creation. But even in the sweetness of summer, not everything runs the way we would hope. We seek strength to bear the pain that may be ours. In our hearts, we would acknowledge that we sometimes fail to keep faith with our sisters and brothers. So may we be forever mindful of the world's need for greater compassion, justice, and beauty. May the warmth of the summer heal our spirits and hold us. And may heart and mind guide us so we can see more clearly and love more dearly. Amen. You may not realize this, but the part of the job description of a Unitarian Universalist minister is to make sure that the congregation is current on their New Yorker magazine readings. or at least to make sure that they didn't miss any gems. So this is one that comes back from June 2nd of this year. It's a great study of how liberals and conservatives have different understandings about happiness. And they seem to express happiness in different ways. So in case you missed it, it starts off with a a very serious a blip from the New York Times, an article that was lifted, and then one of the New Yorker writers, Paul Rudnick, continues to comment on this interesting piece, this novel piece that the New York Times had lifted. So this is from a story in the New York Times. Conservatives are happier than liberals, or so decades of surveys that ask about life satisfaction would suggest. But a new series of studies questions the gap itself, raising the possibility that although conservatives may report greater happiness than liberals, they are no more likely to act in ways that indicate that they are really happier. So Rudnick takes off from there, and he says, further research has been done in this intriguing area, and the results are in. Do you want to hear the results about how? Under the category, ways in which conservatives express extreme happiness, one, they waggle their jowls. They kiss their spouses passionately on the cheek. Ways in which liberals express extreme happiness. They make independent films about how happiness is expressed through batik fabrics in third world countries despite fracking. They also express extreme happiness when the men bake something and then the women write a personal essay about how a man baking isn't enough and how, in fact, it's condescending and offensive. Causes of clinical depression in conservatives. The thought of two people of the same gender getting married and wearing, what the hell do those people wear anyway? Matching scarves and rainbow jumpsuits? Another cause of clinical depression for conservatives, the thought of an illegal immigrant receiving a free measles vaccine and then taking Sunday off. Items of clothing that make liberals burst with pleasure. A Portuguese hemp poncho bought at a street fair and worn to a wedding. One which I know many will relate to here in this congregation, a rawhide bracelet knotted with an amber bead bought at Burning Man, where 50% of the purchase price goes to fight the use of drones and preservatives. Things that cause conservatives to laugh uproariously. Oh, any comic who talks about the difference between men and women because it's all just so damn true. And what really gets them laughing is when an evangelical pastor makes a pun. Things that cause liberals to weep bitter tears. Any photograph of Sarah Palin without a sarcastic caption. What makes liberals weep? The use of gender-specific pronouns and the failure to acknowledge that a newborn baby might be transgender. You see why I need to make sure the congregation stays abreast of these things. Young conservatives are made especially happy by just knowing that on a conservative scale, 46 is still considered young. What makes a conservative especially happy? Turning down offers of marijuana, a free weekend of showtime, and a trip to New York City because a young conservative would rather play golf with his dad and maybe learn something. Young liberals are made especially happy by all liberals are young. Just ask one. things that would make a conservative and a liberal equally happy. No, there is a good answer. There is a good answer. Okay, what would make a conservative and a liberal equally happy if all of their children got into their first choice school but didn't have to room together? That's the news on happiness, liberal and conservatives. That was a lovely amen to end the church. Oh, terrific, terrific. Happiness. Everybody seems to be talking about it. Pope Francis recently gave his prescription for happiness. And that's great because he offers so much credibility. He's a smiling 78-year-old man with only one lung that works. And as the world increasingly turns its back on organized religion, he's the leader of probably the world's most organized religion, but he's more popular than ever. He's happy. He is happy washing the feet of the homeless. He's happy calling up strangers for late-night chats. In fact, I'm such an optimist, every time the phone rings at my house, I think, maybe it's the Pope. What do you think? Mary, I'll get it. I'll get it. Someday. He's happy calling out climate change deniers, and the world awaits with great anticipation for his encyclical on the environment this Thursday. He's happy to stand on the cutting edge of science, where Galileo was once arrested by the church for promoting science. The Pope challenges the science deniers who have too much sway in public policy. The Pope is happy challenging the Koch brothers, virtually calling them idiots, while they must tippy-toe around the vaunted holiness of the Pope and carefully choose their words. Like, well, the Pope may be misled by these so-called experts from the United Nations, of course. United Nations. The Pope is happy that Speaker John Boehner invited him to address a joint session of Congress this September. I don't think John Boehner is happy that he extended the invitation. Just after he was named Pope, in a gathering of the Vatican elite who had selected him, Pope Francis looked at the thicket of clerical power and he said, "May God forgive you for what you have done." And he smiled, and they laughed. The Pope was happy, the others less so. So at last, Pope Francis was asked about his secret to happiness. Here's his answer, and I quote verbatim. Slow down. Take time off. Live and let live. Don't proselytize. Work for peace. Work at a job that offers basic human dignity. Don't hold on to negative feelings. Move calmly through life. Enjoy art, books, and playfulness. That's it. There's no mention of success as a pathway to happiness. No luxury homes, luxury cars, luxury boats. No minimum dollar figure to enter that hallowed space known as happiness. In our frenzied pace of life, overworked, overextended, oversubscribed, none of which leads to happiness, the Pope says, you want happiness? Slow down. Let go of negativity. Be playful. Is happiness some kind of religious thing? The Dalai Lama ventures into the subject of happiness as well. As he sees it, all living beings, starting from insects, want happiness, not suffering. However, we are only one, whereas others are infinite in number. Thus, it can be clearly decided that others gaining happiness is more important than just yourself alone. Well, we may all agree with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but I disagree with him that valuing the happiness of others is clearly decided. If it only was. He echoes the Pope when he says happiness must ultimately come from within oneself. It is wrong to expect happiness to come from money or from a computer. He goes so far as to say happiness is a state of mind. With physical comforts, if your mind is still in a state of confusion and agitation, it's not happiness. Happiness means calmness of mind. So the Pope and the Dalai Lama are really on the same page here. They agree that a kind heart and compassion are the real sources of peace and happiness. Now, somehow we know this to be true, although seldom practiced. The drive for success, leading to an accumulation of things, and the preoccupation with one's own happiness, almost exclusively, pretty much captures the mindset of our compulsively driven society. And so Peter Gomes, the senior minister at the Memorial Church at Harvard University for about the last 30 years until his death, Peter found it quite remarkable that whenever he had occasion to speak to the parents of Harvard students, which was quite often, and he asked them what they hoped for their children, they all said the same thing, year in and year out. They wanted their children to be happy. Peter Gomes said it was astounding that parents never said, oh, what I want for my child is success or power, wisdom. I want my child to be wealthy. They may have privately wanted those things for their children to help offset the pain of tuition dollars. They may have felt that their children were entitled to wealth and power and wisdom, which is why they were at Harvard. But no. Instead, they tell the pastor all they wish for the children is that they are happy. And then they'd add a few comments in order not to sound too glib. They said things like, I don't care what they do, as long as they are happy. Or, if you're happy, you can do anything. Or, if you're happy, it doesn't really matter what you do. Well, I imagine, and it's only speculation on my part, that the parents, and probably most parents, wish for their children the kernel of essence, the essence of what the Pope and the Dalai Lama are talking about, namely moving calmly through life or having this calmness of the mind. These reflect aspects of being that have eluded most parents in their pursuit of happiness, which they sought mostly through material success. But, we can forget about Harvard. You need only look at the student parking lot at Rowland Hall, and you will plainly witness this inherent contradiction. Row upon row of extravagant SUVs, while all the parents really want is for their children to be happy. Happy the way the Pope and the Dalai Lama understand it. A few months ago, New York Times columnist David Brooks asked readers to send essays describing their purpose in life and how they found it. He ended up with a couple of thousand submitted contributions. Initially, Brooks said, his premise was that they would most resemble the remarks of a commencement speaker, full of cliches in our high-achieving culture. He would receive essays that would say, dream big, set ambitious goals, try to change the world. But no, Brooks wrote, a surprising number of people found their purpose by going the other way, by pursuing what he calls the small, happy life. And then he offered some examples of the essays that he received. I'm going to share just one. Elizabeth Young once heard the story of a man who was asked by a journalist to show his most precious possession. The man, Elizabeth Young wrote, was proud and excited to show the journalist the gift he had been bequeathed. A banged-up tin pot he kept carefully wrapped in cloth as though it were fragile. The journalist was confused. What made this dingy old pot so valuable? The message, the friend replied, the message was, we do not all have to shine. Now, this story resonated deeply. In that moment, said Elizabeth Young, I was able to relieve myself of the need to do something important from which I would reap praise and be rewarded with fulfillment. My vision cleared. I have always wanted to be effortlessly kind. I wanted to raise children who were kind. Perhaps the mission is not a mission at all. Everywhere there are tiny, seemingly inconsequential circumstances that, if explored, provide meaning and chances to be generous and kind. Spiritual and emotional growth happens in microscopic increments. That's how she ends her piece, and I love it. Spiritual and emotional growth happens in microscopic increments. I read a disturbing article a few months ago that really stayed with me, and NPR also kind of did a follow-up on the issue. It's about how our college-age youth suffer more anxiety these days than at any other time. Anxiety seems infectious now. In fact, there aren't enough mental health workers around to deal with this new phenomenon spreading throughout all our college campuses. Now, of course, I can't summarize in a sermon what it is that triggers anxiety among so many of our young adults. And probably circumstances are unique to each student. Yet I wonder if there might be some overarching question that can somehow capture the essence of this increased anxiety in a population whose parents ostensibly only wants them to be happy. Now, you may be surprised by the source from which I now draw. Believe me, I am no expert on Aristotle, but am familiar enough with his great work, his masterpiece on ethics. And you and I may both ask, what does Aristotle know about life in the year 2015? I mean, how can he be helpful or relevant to us at all, right here and now? Well, the thrust of his work on ethics deals with how can I make my life a success? He asked that. So I guess we've all been plagued by this question for thousands of years by virtue of being human. Aristotle asked the question that everyone wants to ask. What will make my life worth living? What counts as success? And then I can only appreciate his utter bluntness. His answer does not resemble the impractical model of Thoreau, where we must all drop out, build a cabin by the lake, and value the religious splendor in nature. Although I sometimes feel that Thoreau's answer, especially at the end of a church year, where solitary becomes particularly inviting, it's a pretty good idea. But generally, it's not the answer. Aristotle, however, noted that a number of things counted towards a valuable life. And he names them. He says wealth. He said, don't kid yourself. Wealth is important. And health, strength, beauty, influence, power, ability. But then he adds a caveat. All these things are important but have no real and lasting value if the soul is not good. If the soul is not good. So Aristotle ticks off the elements of good and successful living as the world counts success. But Aristotle notes a difference, what a keen difference between making a living and making a life. The quality of the soul determines the quality of a life. The quality of the soul determines the quality of the life. The Pope and the Dalai Lama discuss happiness in terms of nurturing the soul, the well-being of the soul. Slow down. Move calmly through life. Don't hold on to those negative feelings. Happiness must ultimately come from within. Happiness, the word itself is misleading. Happiness, as Aristotle uses it, has been translated poorly to denote pleasure or contentment. Aristotle's real intent for the word happiness was more nuanced. He doesn't philosophize about pleasure, but a more apt term, namely flourish. What makes a person happy is really understood as what makes a human life flourish. How does a human life attain well-being? All encompassed in flourish. With all that said, the simplest way to understand the concept of happiness is by asking, how do I live well? And when you think about it for a second, how do I live well contrasts significantly with what do I need to live well? Or what do I need in order to be happy? We're basically trapped in a mindset that believes that happiness comes as a result of what we may accumulate. I mean, you may have caught this story the other day about Marco Rubio, who was always in debt, with mortgage loans and student loans, etc. And just when he barely crawled out of debt with his new law practice, he spent $80,000 that he didn't have to buy a boat. And he said, well, that's what I needed to be happy. It was kind of an emblem of success. And so, it's cause and effect. Happiness comes as a consequence of what you purchased. The latest Nike sneaker, the new pool in the backyard, the Cadillac Escalade, so on and so forth. The flourishing of a life, however, does not depend on any acquisition, but in how you live your life. The flourishing of a life does not depend on any acquisition, but in how you live your life. And I sometimes wonder if our lives would be different if instead of a constitutional guarantee to pursue happiness, understood as that which gives us pleasure, if instead our Constitution said we should flourish in our lives. How different that would be. If only we could concentrate less on what do I need to have in order to be happy, and focus more on who do I need to be in order to be happy. And once we reframe the question, we can understand happiness while washing the feet of the homeless. It's in having a compassionate heart that our own happiness is not that important. If I have a calm mind, I am happy. If I move calmly through life, I am happy. So as we enter the season of summer, we might want to try taking some time off. We may want to let go of those negative feelings and move calmly through life. We may want to take the time to enjoy art, books, playfulness. And the only exception, I think, to the Pope's list of happiness, and that is, if you want to proselytize on behalf of Unitarian Universalism, that's okay. Go on. So have a splendid summer. Think about happiness. Ponder what it might mean to flourish. Remember the banged up tin pot as a metaphor that we don't need to shine. It does help clear our vision. The quality of the soul determines the quality of the life. And so let's do some soul work this summer. The Dalai Lama and the Pope, they have it down to perfection. We, at least, can come to some better understanding of happiness ourselves. And let's begin this summer. So be it. Can we conclude with a tricky final hymn? You may have sat on the words. Ouch. So if you need to stand up and remove the words, the choir will sing through 2 verses, and then we will... No? You're going to sing the chorus twice. That's why you're directing music. Okay, but should we stand now and then wait for the nod? All right. As we extinguish the chalice, I want to thank you for the privilege of serving this congregation for 28 years. I have no intention of slowing down, and yet I have every intention of slowing down, as we all must, if we are to allow our lives to flourish. And the summer provides such a wonderful opportunity not only to slow down, but to read, let go of bad feelings, calm the mind, and be playful. And then imagine how joyous it will be to return here again on August 30th with 2 new staff additions and a whole congregation wanting a calm life. We'll work on that, I promise. Please note that the Summer Forum will again offer a terrific program, and I hope to see you here, because I will certainly attend whenever in town. So be safe, flourish, be happy. Amen.